Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell Podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course, and we are pleased to be joined by Calvin Fish, of course, who will be helping call the Rolex 24 at Daytona for NBC Sports, which also can be seen on NBC USA and Peacock, all 24 hours long. Calvin, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited, mate. As you said, this is going to be a big one. It really is the future of sports car racing with the introduction of this LMDH car in the GTP class. So it seems like all the manufacturers are ready. I mean, there's been a lot of consternation about how prepped they are. There's been some teething issues with this hybrid system, but when it was game time last weekend in qualifying, it seems like they all had the raw pace. So it'll be sensational to see them compete here on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to, ask somebody this, because the thing is, there's going to be a lot of new people watching, this race and all that stuff. And the thing is, it's like when people watch IMSA for like first, there's 5 classes of cars out there and all that stuff. So for the casual fan and all that, can you kind of just explain like each class and car, like the crash course, like how, like the difference between each car?
Sure. Well, essentially, you've got 5 classes competing here this weekend. 3 of the classes look very similar, and 2 are pretty much identical with GTD Pro and GTD. So if we start at the top, we've got GTP. That's the premier class with the prototype ranks. There's 9 cars competing here this year with 4 different manufacturers. It's the new hybrid technology competing for the very first time. So within that class, there's a lot of things to be learned in terms of its new technology, how they're going to go. Can a P2 car, so we step down that ladder, the next prototype class is called LMP2. They're going to be running speeds at about 185 miles down the straightaway compared to 200 for the GTP cars, so a little bit slower. Pretty quick through the corners, so they've got good pace there. Probably about 3 to 4 seconds a lap slower than the top class. Some sensational driver lineups there as well. The third prototype class, and there's pretty much an even split between prototypes and GTs this year. You got 28 prototype cars, 33 GT cars competing. The third class is LMP3, a little bit slow, about 450 horsepower. Reaching speeds about 175 down the straightaway. So they all kind of look the same. They'll run at slightly different speeds. There's going to be a big closing rate of speed this year with the GTP cars with that hybrid when it's kicking in. It's going to have about 200 mile an hour top speed. And then within that, we've got 2 other classes now. Within GTD Pro and GTD, the cars spec-wise are identical, but there's a driver ranking system. Yeah. So you have platinums and golds, which are regarded as pro drivers, and you have silver and bronze drivers that are regarded as Ms. So in GTD Pro, you can stack the deck. Fully loaded, factory drivers, best of the best competing. And then in GTD, you have to have a balance between AM drivers and pro drivers. So overall in the race, that pace consideration should mean that they're going to finish behind. But as we saw in qualifying last weekend, it's the GTD cars that are on top with the pros qualifying. So they've got to try and get that drive time knocked out within their ranks there, get the pros in for the finish. And it wouldn't be a surprise to see a GTD car win overall in the GTD rank. So it's fun, it's complex, but the nice thing is, if it gets a little bit dull in one of the classes, we can just move the coverage around here on NBC and show you great racing all day long. So I think it keeps it really fun.
Yeah, especially if we had a battle like we did in GTD Pro last year. So,
oh wow, that would be something.
So kind of talk about with this kind of new era with this LMDH class with the with the hybrid components on the cars, and I wanted to ask about your first impressions of these cars, because everyone talks. I think I was talking with somebody about the reliability issue with them. What kind of talk about what your first impressions are of this car?
Well, all of the 4 manufacturers representing here, so you have Acura, BMW, Cadillac, Porsche, they all have to run the same hybrid system. So it's a common part between all of the cars. Then they can do their own styling. There's a lot of freedom in terms of the software and how you get all of the parts to work together within your race car. Initially, Porsche were out first. They kind of did their shakedown about a year ago. And initially, there were a lot of fundamental issues. They worked through the bugs, and by the time all of the other manufacturers got on track mid-season last year, they were kind of able to get their legs underneath them and get out there. But it seems like every day is a new day. They're so technically advanced. I spoke to Dane Cameron. He said we did like an endurance test of about 20 hours, ticked all of the boxes, came back a week later, another test, and suddenly within 15 minutes, we had a new issue. So they're learning as they go. So We anticipate seeing these cars in the garage a little bit more often than we have in this DPI era, which we're just leaving. But the cars are sensationally quick. We saw that last weekend on just a single lap fly. They are very close to the outright lap record here. And I think they would have got underneath that if that had been a smooth session without Tandy's incident. So the speed is in the cars. It's all about reliability. And there's just a newness to them, Casey. There's nothing you can say other than that. The teams, the technicians, the engineers are learning every time they go back onto the racetrack. And I think the team that wins this year may not have the ultimate outright pace necessarily. That could go hand in hand, but I think it's going to be all about preparation. How quickly can you change some of these parts and get the car back onto the racetrack? But there is the caveat here: a P2 car could sneak in for the win.
Yeah.
I spoke to Jeff Brown, who's Colin Brown's dad. He's a big engineer in the sport. And he said, I've done the math. He said, we're going to be making about 8 more pit stops for fuel through the race. And we're going to be about 3 to 4 seconds a lap slower. That means we should be an hour behind. Well, if you talk to the GTP teams, they're saying if we have a major issue, we could be in the garage for over an hour. So there you go. And the LMP2 field is absolutely stacked as well. So it's not just one team that may get it. There's a handful of teams that could potentially nip this overall win here today, this weekend.
When you look at LMP2, who do you feel like the favorite is? Because we have the PR1 team with Ben Keating. There's kind of like this. I spoke with Ben a few weeks ago. Obviously, he'll have some new drivers this year. Of course, 2 of them going over to the TDS team. So, what do you overall in LMP2? What do you think about who do you think's the favorite over there? And then you also got that Tower Motorsports team too.
Yeah, you said PR1. I mean, they're on the pole, I think, for the 4th year in a row. So they always have blazing speed here. They've got a really stacked lineup as well. But you can pick any of the teams. Look at the CrowdStrike into with George Kurtz, who's the AM in that driver lineup. He's got Esteban Gutierrez. There's Formula One drivers in this field, or ex-Formula One drivers in this field as well. Tower Motorsports, John Ferrano won the championship last year. He's got 2 Penske guys. I like to tease the fact that Penske has stacked the deck. He's got 8 drivers who could win this race this year. He's got 6 competing in GTP. He's also got Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin, who are his IndyCar drivers, kind of moonlighting a little bit and running in that P2 car. So you can't really pick a favorite. I mean, there's just so many really strong drivers. And I would say a good 80 to 90% of the LMP2 field have a really strong shot at a win in class, and then maybe the overall as well.
Yeah. In LMP3, of course, we have the Andretti team. The Sean Creech team put it on the pole. Of course, that's the team featuring, with Joao Barbosa and all that. So LMP3, who do you think is kind of the favorite there? Because we have Andretti, and of course you got with the Sean Creech team as well, and also BBC.
Yeah, I mean, Andretti's team looks stacked. I was just chatting to Lee Diffie about that last night when we were doing some notes here before we left the track. And that team coming off a big win at Petit last year. They got some young drivers in there. Gabby Chavez, great experience. Rasmus Lind. I mean, just some really, really strong drivers in that lineup. Jarrett does a great job as well. So led by Robin Pemberton. They got all of the experience there. They're starting to find their groove in LMP3 now, sort of like highlighted with that win at the end of last season. So they got all of the tools. But again, you mentioned Joao Barbosa, multiple winner here at the Rolex, so much experience. So it's really about finding that blend. You need the speed, but I think you've got to be really smart, very savvy. Don't take any risks surviving, because the closing speeds this year between a GTP car and an LMP3 are extreme. So looking far enough behind, having your spotters work with you, being savvy. And I think that's going to be really the key, staying out of trouble in LMP3. But again, stacked decks throughout this field.
GTD Pro, you look at that, and obviously, there's a lot of teams that went over to this class. Of course, this was the former GT Le Mans class. We saw the Heart of Racing put a team there. We saw the Vassar Sullivan team put a team there, and now the Turner Motorsport team puts a team there with Robbie Foley, of course, being promoted to a gold driver, and also and now official BMW driver. So he and Bill Alberlin are kind of split up there, with Robbie being in GTD now. What's it going to be like in GTD Pro? What are we going to expect there?
Tough field. I think FAF Motorsport, coming off the championship last year, are going to be tough to beat. They're just hitting all cylinders every single year, led by Steve Bortolotti there. Change of driver lineup, though. We've got Patrick Pilet back on North American soil. He's a great competitor. Porsche driver, Klaus Bachler, they're doing the full season. You got Zach Robichon back for the third driver role in the Michelin Endurance Cup for that team. So I think they're the favorite going in just because they've had such a stunning record. But Corvette didn't like how things went last year. That was their first year kind of switching their GT Le Mans car over to GT3 spec to compete in GTD. And they felt they were on the back foot a little bit. So they've learned a lot in 12 months. They're going to display their new car for next year here this weekend. So it'll be fun to see what they got under wraps right now. But so many strong teams. You mentioned BMW's Bill Auberland, winningest driver in IMSA. He's going to be competing in GTD Pro aboard that Turner Motorsports car alongside Chandler Hull. He's got Bruno Spengler, John Edwards alongside him, two BMW factory pilots as well. They'll be tough to beat, but Lexus coming off a big win at Petit, Jack Hawksworth, Barnacote. They've got Mike Conway, Le Mans winner in the car as well. There's no weak teams in that category. So again, it's up for grabs.
And in GTD, this is by far the biggest class of cars in this field. Of course, a lot of the teams that were in GTD Pro, they also have a car in there. So the Heart of Racing team, but the Windward Racing team. And I'm watching all the IMSA races from last season. It seems like they either had a good race or they had completely bad luck, and they got the pole in GTD. And you also look at Magnus Racing too. And I was actually talking to Andy Lally a few weeks ago. This is his 21st consecutive race.
Yeah, breaks the record of Hurley having 20 in a row here this weekend. So that's unbelievable. I think he's got 8 Rolex watches he's won with the victories here and championships along the way. So they've been running strong. They ran well at the Raw last weekend. They've shown good pace here this weekend. Aston Martin seems to be a really strong car in all conditions, every single racetrack. You mentioned Windward Racing. I mean, that team was so unlucky last year. I think they really deserve the championship. If you think about that wet weather race that we had with the red flag at Watkins Glen, they won on the road, but a little bit shy on their drive time. Then at Lime Rock Park, they could see the checkered flag, the fuel pump breaks, but then they won a couple of races in a row, and they've returned this year. They've won here at Daytona before on debut a couple of years ago, and they have the pole for this week's race. So Mercedes looked tough, sweeping the top 3 spots in GTD and GT Pro kind of combined there, and that's how they'll line up on the grid with GTD cars ahead of the Pro cars starting this race this weekend.
So, and also when you look at, let's kind of shift back to the top class for a minute. Action Express was another team that really kind of winning the championship in 2021. They didn't win in 2022. It basically was like, wow, it was just surprising to see that they struggled so much. What do you think about with this kind of new era with this team? What do you think the boys at Action Express are doing? Because Alexander Sims is now the co-driver with Pippo Durrani, and also Jack Aiken comes over, of course, spending some time over in Formula One. Got a chance to talk with him as well. What's it going to be like to see what Action Express is going to do this year?
I think they're going to be on a mission. Gary Nelson, who leads that team, says we expect to win. That's their mantra. And they didn't win last year. It's been many years since we've seen them out of victory lane. They've always been a contender for the championship, always a contender here at the Rolex. A lot of success over the years. I think last year, with their driver lineup, with Felipe Nasr being contracted with Penske to get started over there with Porsche. They had a void there alongside Pippo Durrani. They were struggling to find the right fit. They had Tristan Nunez in there initially. Olivier Pla did the second half of the season, but it didn't quite gel. And I know they're frustrated. They've got a lot of really great guys there. Ian Watt is the engineer, Timmy Keane strategy. They've got Peter Barron there now, who worked with Cadillac Racing at Chip Ganassi last year. So they've stacked the deck on the pit box, brought in 2 new drivers. Sims has good history with GM running the Corvette endurance role. He has Formula E experience, so I think that's really a key element when teams were looking for new drivers. Who has the history with this type of technology with Formula E? And Jack Aiken, I met him for the very first time here last weekend. Super bright young man, couple of Grand Prix under his belt already at his age, and he's excited to go. And he was immediately on the pace. So I expect that team to rebound here this year.
Yeah. You look at Acura as well, of course. With the 10 and the 60, with Meyer Shank, a little bit of a change there with Colin Braun stepping up after many years with Core Autosport. is going to Meyershank to team up with Tom Blomqvist. And we saw in qualifying that 60 is fast.
It was fast all week, and Tom said on Sunday morning, there's a lot of pressure now. We've been fast all week. Can we make it happen? And it looked like they got a little bit wrong. They did an initial run. There's a change in the quali rules now. We can run 2 sets of tires. That was the strategy they went for. Then Tandy had his shunt. Suddenly it was red flag. Were they going to get back out there? And Tom just stepped up. He was the sensation last year. I mean, he was alongside Ollie Jarvis, and they won the championship together. But Tom really took that opportunity to jump back into a prototype over here. And he is the real deal. Mike Shank is really excited about this season. There's that competitive spirit between the two Acura teams. They both want to be top dog, right? And Meyer Shank Racing came out on top by just a few points at the end of last year. Wayne Taylor Racing, now with Andretti Autosport, they have such a stunning record here at the Rolex. So 2 top teams. Meyer Shank's the defending champions here. And for Colin, it's a great opportunity for him. He always seems to shine to me. I mean, he's great in whatever he drives, but you put him in a high downforce prototype, and he has the ability to make it happen and get hold of that steering wheel. And he loves the high downforce cars and the speed that they create. So I think he's going to be really strong. He's already fitting in well. He knows Mike Shank well. He actually competed with Mike back here in 2009, which I didn't remember till I looked at the history. And he also has the closed circuit lap record here 10 years ago when they put that car together to run around the speedway here at some sensational speed. So there's chemistry there, and it seems to be working well.
Yeah. And there's 2 new teams as well to the top class, of course. Well, one's not new with Penske. Of course, they're back. They were known as Acura Team Penske. Now, of course, with Porsche and the Porsche factory drivers and also BMW. Rahal makes that jump up to the top class as well with a lot of their guys. What's it going to be like for those 2 teams this year?
Well, I think Bobby Rahal is excited about this, but he realizes there's a lot of pressure. He wants to really succeed. He wants to deliver. They've had a couple of big GT Le Mans victories here back in 19 and 20. Bobby wanted to compete in the top class once again, and he certainly got that opportunity with the full support from BMW Motorsport. And they got a lot of really good players as well in that group in terms of the engineering. They got 85 people from Munich over here this weekend to support that effort. It's a big time. And for Porsche Penske, well, Roger has always wanted that ability to go to Le Mans and win overall. And this year he's going to have that opportunity with his dual program in WEC and here in IMSA. And you know, they've had history before with the RS Spiders back in the early 2000s. They have prototype history, most recently winning a couple of championships with Dane and JPM, and then Ricky and Elio just a couple of years ago. So they got all of the credentials. These are the best of the best. We're talking about top level teams, Indy 500 winners, championship winners, and they're going up against head to head here this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. One team I did forget to mention, Ganassi. Of course, they're with them and with Sebastian and all them. They're 2 cars this year for the Rolex. Obviously, those split running the WEC championship. What do we expect from the Ganassi team this year?
Execution. I mean, Chip likes winners, as he likes to say. And I saw him last night at the RRDC dinner. He said, we'll win this thing if we finish. So there's a degree of skepticism amongst all of the big teams because they don't know. They don't know what's around the corner and if they can handle a problem and get the car back out there. But they feel by his comment there that they have the speed. Bourdais put in a flyer there. He was only a sniff off the front row. Stack lineup. They brought in an extra car, their WEC lineup of Alex Lynn, Bamber, and Westy here to support that effort this weekend. So I think Porsche would probably go into this event as the favorites. But for Cadillac Racing, they have 3 cars of the 9-car field. So maybe that extra entry can make a difference. We've seen that happen at Le Mans many, many times.
Yeah. A friend of mine wanted me to ask you this. Where did the term argy bargy come from?
Well, it's a term that's used in England, and I thought it was appropriate. And people said, you made that word up. I said, no, I didn't. Look it up in the dictionary. So it's just a little bit of confrontation, and it seems to have stuck. People enjoy it. So we'll roll it in there now and again without it sounding redundant.
Yeah. And last thing I want to ask you, I've asked all the drivers I've talked to this week, what's it going to take to win the Rolex 24 at Daytona?
You're going to need speed, obviously. That's always a factor in motor racing, right? But I think this year more than ever, it's about being prepared for all of the problems that will come your way. There's going to be some technical difficulties. I do not see any of these manufacturers going through this race cleanly without having to bring the car in for unscheduled stops and maybe some trips back to the garage. Teams are setting up with a sub team just sitting in the garage waiting for that moment. All of the parts supplies, who has the most spares? I mean, supply chain issues is a factor too. If you start knocking pieces off the car during the race from the driver's standpoint, do you have enough parts left in the garage area to fix these cars? So many elements. I think it's going to be whoever can fix the problems the quickest will be in victory lane here this year.
All right. Well, Calvin Fish, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. And have a great call, the Rolex 24 at Daytona. And you can catch it on NBC USA and Peacock this weekend.